What keeps you up at night from a public policy perspective, if you will?
Continuing to see communities demolish their historic buildings, I think, is a tragedy in a sense that's it's such a mistake, I think, for communities to tear down that history, and not simply because I'm a building hugger. I'm not, never have been. I got into this field by working for a developer that, through renovating historic buildings, really created more economic development in a sense than almost anyone else in that particular community. It created new jobs, it attracted new people, it attracted those sort of young professionals that could live anywhere. So when I see communities tearing down their downtown for parking lots or those small pocket parks, I think it's such an irreversible mistake because they can't get that building back, and it's unlikely that anyone's going to build on that lot.
What your argument reminds me of is earlier you've said to me in previous conversations how Ohio may not have oceans to attract the young, but we have all these historic buildings which they seem to find very attractive. They love brick, for example. Yes. So by us tearing down these historic brick buildings, we are in effect like if we were South Carolina blowing up our beaches and removing all of our sand. It's about the same thing, then, is what you're saying then.
That's a very interesting analysis, and yeah, I think it is somewhat similar, that it's something that is incredibly attractive to people, creative people, people that want to live in the buildings, that want to put their businesses in those buildings, that want to visit those types of communities. So to sort of tear down those, that particular resource, which is not renewable in a sense, you can't necessarily build a building like that anymore, is a pretty big mistake on the part of a community.
Yeah, and I've noticed that too, that the youth are really attracted to unique, authentic places, buildings, communities, things of that nature.
Absolutely. I was co-teaching a planning class at Ohio State, and the class was giving a presentation down in Lancaster, and the community was trying to tear down a 1820s hotel, and somebody in the crowd asked the students, well, you don't like this building, right? You think it should come down? And all the students were really sort of taken aback, like, no, of course you don't tear this down. This is what we want. This is the type of building we want. We would want to live in. We'd want to shop in. We want to be a part of. So it's funny that those with a little more age assume that nobody cares about the history when actually the reverse is true.
Jeff, people out there often have some misconceptions as to how things actually are. Is there some belief that many people have that is false, and you can basically prove it here? Can you be a mythbuster for us here today?
Well, often a question that we get is, isn't it cheaper to tear down a building and build something new? And again, I'd like to reiterate that I'm not simply a preservationist. I think that I look at the economic development aspect of downtown revitalization and preservation. So it's not necessarily true that just tearing down a building and building something new is cheaper. I have a friend who's a judge, and a good example, they wanted to build a brand new court facility, and they priced it out. It was going to be $13 million to build everything brand new. Because I talked to him about it. It's like, oh no, these technology needs and security needs just can't be met in a historic building. Well, $13 million was a pretty hefty price tag. They went back and looked at renovating an 1890s building, and it came in at $6.5 million.
Half the cost.
Half the cost. And he kind of came to me later and said, well, that was sort of dumb of me. I realized that it had walls, floors, a ceiling. It was already there. It was easy to upgrade. So it typically is. I mean, there's cases where it might be more expensive, but then there's tax credits, there's programs, but there's also the bigger picture too of sort of restoring something that's part of the community that's already, that's the infrastructure that's already built. So many times it is cheaper, but it's a question we face often, that the communities just think it's cheaper to tear something down. And I always say, well, if you had a 57 Chevy, and it's rusted out, would you just assume, blow it up and go build something new?
Right.
No, of course you wouldn't. You would just restore that car, and old buildings are no different.